This episode of the RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by AIM EC Herbicide from FMC. AIM EC Herbicide powers up your spring burn-off with control of the tough weeds like kochia and cleavers. And because it's a Group 14 product, AIM EC Herbicide is the cornerstone of a solid resistance management program.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
Hello and welcome to RealAg Radio. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, for this Friday, January 19th. Yes, it is Lyndsey. No Sean Haney. Why? Because he is very busy, y'all. He is traveling. He's got all sorts of stuff going on. And so he said, hey, Lyndsey, can you host Friday? And I was like, heck yeah, I can. Because do you know what happens on Friday? Beef market update with Anne Wasko. So you're going to hear that. And the issues panel like we have every week. So, of course, Kelvin Heppner will be here. But no Sean Haney. Instead, we've got Cherilyn Jolly-Nagel. She's a farmer out of Mossbank, Saskatchewan. And, of course, Kelvin Heppner out of Altona, Manitoba. So, yes, looking forward to that. So we'll have them on. As always, for this show or any show, if you've got any feedback, give us a call, 1-855-776-6147, or zip me an email, lsmith@realagriculture.com. And, of course, you can find us across social media at Real Agriculture. We've got a YouTube channel. You can find us on TikTok, X, Facebook, Instagram. You name it, we're probably there. All right, so send us a DM, story ideas, feedback on the show, whatever the case may be. So, as I mentioned, we are going to take a quick break, and then I will be back with the beef market update with Anne Wasko. Going to ask if this cold weather in Western Canada, even in the east and down into the U.S., is having any impact on the cattle markets. Right after this. Co-op knows your community because we live here too. Our teams are your trusted partners with a range of expertise to help support your entire farm operation. And we're giving back. In the past 5 years, Co-op has invested over $1.1 billion in the prairies through building, upgrading, and expanding local facilities. And we've returned over $1.17 billion to Co-op members in the prairies. Co-op, we're all building something for the future. Here for your farm, here for your family. Learn more at coop.crs/farm.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
Does your N stabilizer contain an active ingredient load high enough to be agronomically effective? If not, it could be costing you time and money. If you're putting down a nitrogen stabilizer, put your trust in Koch Agronomic Services. Solutions like Super U, Tribune, and Anvil. Each delivers high active ingredient concentrations that low-rate products just can't match. Compare how imitator products stack up to agronomically effective solutions at defendyourn.ca.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio. I am your host for the day, Lyndsey Smith, and that actually means that I'm also the host for the Beef Market Update with Anne Wasko. Welcome here, Anne.
It's a good day.
It is, isn't it? It's been a few weeks.
We get to talk.
Yes, we absolutely do. Now, I sort of wish it was, like a super raucous report that you had, but I have a sense that this time of year is maybe not that, and I've got to know what this cold weather in the West and parts of the U.S. have been doing to the cattle market. So maybe let's start there.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things. First of all, the weather really has been the key factor here for the last couple of weeks. And then in January, it's kind of often a quiet time frame anyway. So we've got to that's what's hanging over the markets right now. So not a lot of trade in the U.S., a little bit in some of the northern feeding areas at 175 live and 273 dressed. That's going to be steady to maybe a buck higher from last week. So it's certainly holding together, just not a lot of activity. The cattle futures markets, if you've been watching those, really after making that low right after U.S. Thanksgiving, so the beginning of December, they've been quietly marching higher. And this was another good week. It's off a little bit this morning, but this week it's been marching higher again. So that's been good to see as well. I think the big news in terms of the weather really impacting, well, obviously it's impacting cattle performance in feedlots, and everywhere, but it's certainly also impacting packing plants and their throughput and running at smaller kill schedules and whatnot. So what that impact is, Lyndsey, is we've seen a lot less beef coming into the market the first 2 weeks of the year because of these smaller kills, and that's shot the cutout back up quite a bit. So this week, last night, the choice cutout closed at $2.96. That's $10 and change higher than a week ago. And if you just compare it to kind of 2 weeks ago where we were, it's $20 100 higher. So, and those are U.S. dollars. So the smaller beef production has certainly meant stronger cutout prices and putting packers, back into a better position in terms of profitability, which is what we need to get through the cattle this quarter.
Right. So,
and then the last thing.
Sorry, I was just going to, on that note, the last time you and Sean talked, the packers were losing per. So this has likely pushed them back to the black.
Yes, exactly. So when Sean and I talked 2 weeks ago, I think we talked about $50 a head in the red. And whenever packers are losing money, they tend to often, one of the choices is you slow down your kill or cut shifts and things like that, which is not what we need to get through, like I say, the first quarter inventory that we need to march through. So this is hopefully will help get through some of these cattle. Plus, with the cold weather, you've slowed some of the gains down and slowed some of the cattle down as well. The other thing on the U.S., we've got this afternoon, we've got the January 1st cattle on feed report. So these are the expectations for that report. So we'll see how it comes out after this, but the market is preparing for 2% more cattle on feed January 1, December placements down 4%, and December marketings down 1% compared to a year ago. So that's what the market's kind of prepared for as we head into this afternoon's report. Just to kind of swing things back to Canada, has also been very quiet on the cash market as we've had a deep freeze as well. Mm-hmm. I think feedlots would be happy if we could find some cash trade at steady money, $3.60. That would be delivered dressed. Last week, Canfax average live on a live basis was just a squeak under $2.20. So we'll see if we do get any business done this week. But again, cattle have kind of been stopped their noses and sat back with this weather. So we'll see what happens. But to kind of finish on a story that Sean and I started 2 weeks ago on carcass weights in Canada, we've got some biggies happening. These are steer carcass weights nationally. And last night we just got the data in for the second week of January, and steer weights came in at a whopping 987. Lyndsey, that's 47 pounds bigger than last year and 56 pounds bigger than the 5-year average. So these are massive. This is not really what we need to get through, again, in Western Canada, the inventory that we have on feed for first quarter. And also, it just puts that much more beef on the market that it just becomes a real drag on the market. We'll see what this cold snap does in terms of setting the cattle back. But, we've started off with some real big cattle. And granted, it was a phenomenal, November and December to feed cattle in Western Canada, and that's showing up in these weights big time.
So we have to, a little bit of cold, not a huge impact. We've had some incredible cold for a huge area and incredible cold. So, it will have an impact, obviously, on gains, the amount of time people want to spend outside doing the extra stuff. Let's be honest, but we're talking dangerously cold. So it has definitely been, a setback on that front. When we're sort of coming out of it now, more average winter temps. When do you foresee then, how much of a delay before we sort of see how much that slowed down carcass growth, let's say, like a month from now? When would we see that?
Well, that's a great question, Lyndsey. Well, I think it's just it tends to take some time So over the next few weeks, we'll see how these carcass weights show. And then the other piece is how, do packers kind of get right back to a regular shift, and do we get back to, kind of a normal kill schedule on both sides of the border. So we'll be watching those fed kill numbers and these carcass weights as we go forward. But yeah, it's not a 1 week wonder. It takes some time for that impact to show up.
Mm-hmm. Now, we did get some numbers on cattle on feed for Alberta and Saskatchewan as well, did we not?
Yeah, Canfax released their January 1st cattle on feed report for Alberta and Saskatchewan last week. And no big surprises. Compared to a year ago, cattle on feed numbers were up 1%. And just to give you a broader picture, they're up 2% from the 5-year average. December placements were down as we expected, down about 14%. And we knew, we had such a busy early fall that it was going to be quieter in November and December, and that's exactly what happened. And if we're watching the steer and heifer placements, both of them were down as well, pretty evenly. So it wasn't like, heifers considerably more or less than steers. And then the other piece is we had a really good December fed cattle kill in Canada. We had such a small kill in November. If you remember, packers were really focusing on getting market cows harvested, and so the fed cattle suffered. In December, it did pick back up to 1% above a year ago. So that was a good sign. We noticed first 2 weeks of January we're running at a smaller kill, so I'm glad to see we had a good one in December. And just to finish on that fourth quarter December, just so you can see how small that fourth quarter kill was, in Canada, we were down 10% on our steer and heifer kill compared to 2022. So, and the smallest since 2017. So it was a tiny kill with again, a lot of focus on getting cows processed.
Yeah, and it is interesting. Year over year is always interesting, but looking at that 5-year really sort of puts some things in perspective for sure. So the smallest or the least amount since 2017, like that's significant.
Yeah, it tells you it was a small one.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. Now, I wanted to share, so Kelvin Heppner was at Manitoba Ag Days this week, and he said one of the best attended discussions that he saw was full of beef producers. It was all about wintering cattle and all. It was all on beef production. Do you get a sense that there is energy in the landscape on? We know the cow herd shrinking, but for those who are in it and in it to win it, if you will, that there's some renewed optimism for this industry. I mean, this is not the markets. This is totally your opinion. But Kelvin was pretty impressed by how many people turned out to talk about cattle.
Yeah. Well, think about what we traded calves for last year, or grass cattle. I mean, the prices were phenomenal, obviously. It was a big jump in 2023 versus anything previous. I don't think 2024 is going to see the same kind of jump, but certainly the numbers are setting us up for stronger prices again. Sean and I have talked about that at the year end. And so no doubt about it. I mean, the profitability piece has finally turned a corner. What we really need, and maybe some parts are getting it, but this whole moisture piece. So that's the one thing I feel hanging. But as far as terms of cattle prices, that certainly has got some big time optimism out there for sure.
All right, we'll see if we can make it rain. All right, Anne Wasko, have a wonderful 2 weeks. Maybe we'll talk to you in 2 weeks. Maybe it'll be Sean. We'll see.
Okay, have a good day.
All right, you too. Okay, we'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
When you see how fast Intruvix 2 herbicide from FMC smacks down narrow-leaved hawksbeard, volunteer canola, kochia, and those other problem weeds, you'll be saying, stronger and faster. Shut the front door. Apply it with glyphosate before planting cereals, and you'll enjoy cleaner fields faster while protecting your future glyphosate use. Cheese and crackers. Just how easy can you get? Intruvix 2 herbicide from FMC. Clean is good. See your local retailer.
As you look ahead to the next growing season, there's a lot to consider when it comes to your crop. You need every possible advantage available to you. The Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com has everything you need to make the best choice for you and your farm. On-demand videos with leading industry experts available anywhere, anytime. Go into the season confident and ready with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com.
I'm Lyndsey Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lyndsey Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Friday, January 19th. I cannot believe I'm saying that, actually. All right, this segment is brought to you by the new Oxbow cereal broadleaf herbicide from New Farm. Oxbow is powered by Duplicent technology that is a workhorse on resistant kochia and other tough weeds in wheat and barley. Joining me now, it is the Issues Panel. Super exciting. Sean gave me the show and the panel. He's not even here. We can do whatever we want. Joining me out of Mossbank, Saskatchewan, is Cherilyn Jolly-Nagel. Hello, Cherilyn.
Good morning.
This is pretty exciting. We only have 3 segments, though, Cherilyn, so we're going to have to talk very quickly because we have a lot of things.
In 3 hours?
That's right. It's doable. That's right. There are some podcasts that are that long, and that just blows my mind. Yeah, exactly. Before we bring in Kelvin, what's the weather like? Do you have snow in Mossbank?
Yes, we do have snow here in Mossbank. Not a lot, and not even enough to go ditch banging. So, it's just irritating at the moment. It's super windy. It is supposed to warm up a little bit come tomorrow, I think. But yeah, it's irritatingly windy and brisk and not all the fun, cool things like snow to play in.
Right. I know. It is the worst of both worlds, right? No snow and cold. Should be, yeah. Also joining us for the Issues Panel, Kelvin Heppner out of Altona, Manitoba, where it is a winter wonderland and everything is perfect, right?
Exactly. Yes, it is cold, and we have a good amount of snow on the yard. Not as much as normal at this time of year, but enough to for the kids to play outside. Not enough to go ditch banging here either, though.
I love that we have brought that term fully into. We're gonna have all our American friends are gonna be like, "What does that mean?"
You know what? I use the term stick handle all the time with colleagues in the U.S., and they're like, "Remind us again."
Yes.
What does it mean? It's a hockey reference, and it's lost on them.
Yeah. So winter is just a giant part of our culture, and therefore winter terms make their way into everyday conversation. Yeah. Speaking of, if any of you are trying to heat your home, you probably are paying carbon tax on it. But we saw this week, Kelvin, Stephen Guilbeault, our Minister of Environment and Climate Change, he said, "Don't worry, everybody's getting a carbon tax rebate check this week, so everything's cool." Yes or no? Is everything cool in Manitoba with that check? Does it cover it all?
I don't think so. Well, definitely not. On an individual household, if you just look at your personal expenses and live in a small house, maybe it might, but that's not accounting for the carbon tax that's paid by your employer often in that case, and the general costs to the economy, that type of thing. So the communications around this the whole way through have been pretty poor, and this is another example of them basically doubling down, continuing with down the same path.
Cherilyn, do you guys going on vacation on that carbon tax check, or how much is that covering of the bill at your place?
Seriously, that messaging from him is so condescending. I'm just irritated by it altogether. Put the checks out. You're going to get some votes from that. So politically strategizing, I get it. Just put the checks out. But trying to pretend like it's somehow a wash just drives me mental. And the timing is good for this. David, my husband, got a check, the carbon climate action, whatever it is, check in the mail the other day. It's like $300 or something like this. I've never gotten one. Maybe I don't even make enough money to get one of these. I don't know how they calculate this. So he gets a check. I do not. And it's $300. And I think, in what world would they ever calculate that as a wash? I'm so irritated by it.
So go ahead, Kelvin.
We have the same thing here too. And again, like on a household basis, if I look at what we spend on fuel, where we pay a carbon tax, and we heat with electricity here in Manitoba, so don't have a carbon tax on it. But I got the same check, and it was the same situation in our household where I got it and my wife didn't. But and I don't know how they determine that.
For women, I don't think women.
It's carbon.
Real on brand.
So yeah, it's carbon.
I read
it's
somewhere
male.
Women don't get the climate action check.
Right.
I read that.
Yeah, we get the baby checks, Cherilyn. So it's not at all sexist. at all.
That's true.
But what I was going to say is, if I look at our broader farm business, it comes nowhere close. Just like Cherilyn says, in terms of heating in our barns and other places that we pay the tax on fuel and energy. So it comes nowhere close. I do wonder, like the government did introduce this rebate for farmers of I think it's $1.73 for every $1,000 in eligible farming expenses. That's something that your accountant that's at tax time that rebate actually happens. But again, it's not directly linked with your consumption the amount of carbon tax that you pay. It's based on eligible farming expenses in total. And I think this is something where they've really lost the communications on this. This is, I think Minister Guilbeault maybe was trying to refer to this rebate in addition to or on top of the checks that went out this week. But again, it's not clear and most people don't understand. And it's, again, insignificant in proportion to the amount that people are paying on their individual invoices that they get from their fuel suppliers.
Yeah. And this is, no, go ahead, Cherilyn.
It's the hidden ones that drive me crazy. That Canadians we do not have the ability to calculate how much carbon tax we actually pay, because it's in all of the food production, of course, is on the farming side, but the freight, the transportation to get food and other basic necessities that go all the way across this massive country, that's not calculated anywhere. No. You know, that little check that we got wouldn't even be the carbon tax we pay just to Sask Power or just to Sask Energy, or those are the ones that aren't hidden because it's an actual line item. On our power bills, which I appreciate. But the rest of it is all just hidden and mixed in there. And the question is, if the farmers were not forced to pay the carbon tax, would the climate have changed at all? Not even a little bit.
Yeah.
Not 1 degree.
Well, and also, you know, if we're supposed to think about a tax is supposed to change behavior, which I'm not sure how we have an HST then, but whatevs, that's a bit different. But if a tax in this sense is supposed to change behavior, how I still don't. No one has been able to explain to me how this changes behavior, in that realistically we've lost any connection between, you know, what's paid or change behavior, or what programs are available potentially to adopt differences that often don't even come close, or they're not available, or they don't work. I know that, I mean, this check in the mail or the direct deposit in your account, originally it was assessed on your taxes and done that way, but that was too hidden as far as the benefit that the feds were giving you. So now we turn around and we're going to mail out checks. Like, to me, it's just political. It's not actually in any way an intelligent way to do this. And I've done the little calculator thing, and honestly, you're right, both of you, that it does not account for a whole bunch of ways that we pay the carbon tax. It doesn't account for that. And honestly, it is basic family, like a model family that I don't even know exists, that would actually come out ahead. And again,
and it only counts, again, the direct expenses, not
exactly, not the hidden ones.
And
does that change behavior? Like, the idea is, well, if you got $300, but you spent, you know, you only spent $200 in a carbon tax, then you're ahead. Well, but it still gets whittled down to almost nothing, even in that scenario. So I wanted to leap off this because the week that this is happening, we also saw from the Ag Carbon Alliance this week, I started getting emails, and I'm sure the two of you have as well, from different producer groups that are asking farmers to show us your receipts. Kelvin, have you got any of these emails?
Yeah, I have. They've launched this campaign, I guess, together with what happened in the Senate leading into the holiday season with Bill C-234 being amended and all the different campaigns that were done there in terms of trying to convince senators to follow through on the will of the House of Commons and get this legislation across the finish line. Now, of course, C-234 is going back to the House of Commons, and the House will resume sitting after next week, the last week of January. And so this will be back in the headlines. And now the Liberal government will, if they want to continue blocking this, they will have to stand up and have their MPs stand up and actually block it, instead of having so-called independent senators who really seem to be taking their direction from the Liberal government. But at least there was that plausible deniability factor there. That won't be there anymore. And so especially you get to Eastern Canada, where there's some rural Liberal seats that are really on the line based on what we're seeing in the polls so far. There will be some pressure on MPs in the Liberal Party to to support and voice that support for C234, which would again exempt the use of or the carbon tax on farm uses of propane and natural gas. But yeah, it's going to be in the headlines here for the coming months, and of course the Conservative Party continues to make this a priority. Polyev, their leader, talking about the next election being a carbon tax election.
Mm-hmm. Which the sooner it happens, the better for the Conservatives. But we know it's on. We know it's October 2025 at the latest. But I guess anything can happen. So, Cherilyn, of course, you don't run a barn, but you've got plenty of grain. What do you keep the carbon tax line item where you can find it? Do you keep tally of that and track it?
Yeah, we do the best we can with our bookkeepers and our accountants to try to put a line item so that we can try to track that. But again, it's the hidden costs of that. And I don't want to quash the initiative that is show your receipts. I do want farmers to the best of their ability to send those in. But I don't think it actually grasps the impact of the carbon tax. I think they were asking for receipts from, and I'm quoting this, essential farm operations. And so they listed a few, like irrigation, like heating, like grain drying, heating your barn, all of those things. But in my humble opinion, the most essential part of farm operation is fuel. Nothing happens without fuel in general. So if you think about liters of fuel that would go through a farm operation, at 15 cents a liter, like do the math on those numbers. It's hard. I want to contribute in the show your receipts so that I feel like I'm, you're doing my best to prove it. But how do you calculate? I don't have an invoice for all of the fuel at 15 cents a liter, the tens of thousands of dollars that farmers are paying just in that portion of it. Mm-hmm. So again, I don't want to quash the initiative. If we need to have these kinds of things go through to show physical evidence of what it costs, then great. But we're missing like the big number.
Mm-hmm. And Kelvin, I was going to say, we also saw, and the mushroom farmer here in Ontario who sort of got famous for being referred to as, my question on this initiative is, I agree. I think it's important that we put some real numbers to this, but we also saw the reaction from the government when faced with real numbers was basically, well, they can afford it. So, Kelvin, do you think we'll change that opinion or that narrative at all?
That was kind of at least from some of the senators, especially as C234 was in the Senate in fall, was kind of their message. And again, to go back to what Cherilyn said about a condescending message, talk about a condescending message in terms of, well, then at least you guys can afford it and you don't need to worry. We don't need to help you guys because you can afford it. No, but it's all about competitiveness. And that's not it is putting people out of business. It can be a tipping point in terms of putting people over. And so in terms of your question about the Show Your Receipts campaign, Lyndsey, sorry, I went down a political trail there. I didn't talk about the campaign, but I can speak specifically to our farm. I track it on a monthly basis, our monthly natural gas bill, and our percentage that we pay on carbon tax in our barns. So we have poultry, and heating our barns would be our third highest expense on an annual basis. Operating expense after feed would be the highest, then actually the birds themselves that we pay for, and then keeping the barns heated. And it's consistently up in that 30 to 33% range lately of our natural gas bill is the carbon tax and the GST that they charge on the carbon tax.
That's right. Which we're running out of time. We have to take a break.
Yeah.
But this is the other thing that we don't always talk about.
From 20 to 30. It's into the 30% now of our heating cost in our barn is carbon tax.
And here's the point that Canadians need to understand. We are taxing food production. Is that really a value that Canadians have? Is that really where you want to generate tax dollars is from food production? I don't think so.
Yeah. It's an excellent point. Let's pause there. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back with more of the RealAg Issues Panel right after this.
Whether you're in a career within an organization, starting your own business, looking for your dream job, running your own farming operation, operating a company in ag or food, or want to hone your overall life skills, this conference is for you. Celebrating over 10 years of bringing women in ag together, join the Advancing Women Conference in Calgary on March 17th, 18th, and 19th. Visit advancingwomenconference.ca for more information and to register.
There's a reason we call it the Corn School. Videos on everything from planter setup to weed control, field trial results, and the latest yield strategies. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast in your favorite podcast app. Check out the latest Corn School episode today.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Friday. It is time for the Issues Panel. This segment is brought to you by FP Genetics, innovative seed genetics for Canadian farmers. Contact your local FP dealer or territory manager to discuss your certified seed strategy specific to your region. Visit fpgenetics.ca today. Okay, joining me on the Issues Panel here, we have Cherilyn Jolly-Nagel out of Saskatchewan and Kelvin Heppner out of Altona, Manitoba. Kelvin, let's start because it's your favorite topic, inflation. We did get some Canadian numbers, and they're not good for those of us waiting for interest rates to come back down.
Yeah, tick up again, up about, I think it's 0.3 of a percentage point. 3.4% was the headline inflation in the month of December. So like you said, this will feed the Bank of Canada narrative, and this is something that we've been seeing in other countries as well. The U.S. last week we talked about this, Europe as well this week. Inflation showing that it is sticky, and this is sounding like a broken record here, but I think this is something that we've kind of seen coming in terms of being tougher to bring it down than what was expected by central bankers, and also what us as individual borrowers are maybe hoping for when it comes to borrowing rates. But now it's pushed back expectations to kind of the middle of this year in terms of when we could see a pivot to rate cuts. The bond markets, if you look at what the market is pricing, a few weeks ago they were still pricing 150 basis point cuts, so 1.5% cut to interest rates before the end of this year. Well, if we get into the middle of the year before they start making cuts, you're running out of number of decisions, or they've got to move dramatically if they're going to move that far. So right now, I think the bond markets are, the last couple of days have been pricing in about a 1% cut to interest rates before the year end. So that's kind of what the market's expecting, but it keeps getting pushed back, and data like we saw this week from in terms of Canadian inflation data is supporting that.
Well, and what worries me a little bit is, of course, that is sticky. That inflation number is not necessarily, I mean, we saw it come down. We have seen it come down. But this last little bit is probably going to be the hardest. The problem is the longer it stays where it's at, the more it sort of feeds into how much more people are paying for things. Fuel prices don't seem to be coming down anytime soon, especially with all the global issues happening with our logistics and in the Red Sea region, which we heard about this week on the Frontlines podcast. So it worries me that, I guess the thing is, nothing is certain until it happens, right? So it looks less likely that that's going to happen. Now, we did have, I got to say, this week was really busy for announcements, and not surprisingly, I suppose, as we get back into the swing of things, into the farm show season and conferences, etc. We did see this week, or last week, I guess, but talked about it this week. The Farm Credit Canada has announced a sustainable incentive for those that do their lending with FCC that aren't necessarily part of some of the other programs they're partnered on, but lenders, those who are borrowing money from FCC that qualify under the 4R stewardship program, working with an agronomist can qualify for up to $2,000 in an incentive. Cherilyn, do you think this moves the needle on 4R adoption?
Well, this is kind of the first time hearing about this incentive. So, I mean, $2,000, I would up to $2,000. That's always the tricky part. First of all, good on FCC for wanting to throw something back. But also, I'm pretty sure Ag Expert's got to be at the $500 a year mark, maybe north of that. So still, so some money is going to come back. But the 4R program, like that kind of checklist, in order to be compliant with that, I'm assuming you've got to have variable rate. So you're looking at, call it $10 an acre for variable rate. So, I mean, it's expensive to meet those kinds of targets. So I wouldn't call this an incentive. Up to $2,000, I would not call that any sort of actual incentive to change any sort of behavior. No.
So it's if you borrow up to $400,000, or if you have up to $400,000 in lending, you would qualify for the full $2,000. So it's prorated up to that. Meaning
it's
that
kind of like getting a free Go mug or something like that. All of these things just kind of get in the what when you think
swirled.
It sounds like a big number, $2,000. It's not. It's not a big number at all.
Mm-hmm. Kelvin, this is in addition to several other programs. Now, the one thing I will say is and someone who is with FCC or part of these, let me know, but I do think some of these are additive. So that's the one difference that maybe might help is that, so FCC, they have a Cargill connection, they have the CRSB connection, they have the Ducks Unlimited, this is the 6th program, I think. And I think these are additive, meaning you would qualify for both, but all of them are capped at $2,000. So Kelvin, same question to you. Would an incentive like that on your lending make you change what you do as far as 4R, try and adopt more of those practices? Is it enough?
No, I don't think it is enough to really change behavior. It would be a nice token if you were already doing this kind of thing. And on the potato side of things, they have a program with McCain's. That's where I think it's additive. McCain's is paying potato growers on top of this. But I do wonder whether there's also opportunity cost in this. And this is something that, again, maybe somebody at FCC can clarify. But what about that market for carbon offsets that we talked about years ago that was going to be this big new revenue stream for farmers? If you take this money, are you potentially precluding yourself from seeing benefit elsewhere because of the double dipping? That is, there's going to be all kinds of rules around double dipping. And if you take this incentive for implementing 4R, are you still eligible for other incentives for implementing 4R that could be offered potentially? I think this is where farms, the green accounting cost is going to could potentially be a significant expense down the road.
Well, and
also, you guys, fundamentally, do we really want any sort of financing tied to obscure environmental farm practices? Like, I don't want to have any ties whatsoever between the financial institutions, Crown or otherwise, with environmental farm practices. Those two things should not be together.
But it is, I think, something that we're seeing more of. Yeah. And it's an excellent point, Cherilyn. Is that what we want? Does it get us where we need to go? Is it? And I would say that, and if Sean were here, he'd probably iterate some of the conversations he had this week on this exact topic, that there is definitely some concern on the landscape that, instead of it just being your numbers, which are numbers are what they are, right? You can, maybe make an argument around your numbers, but numbers are what they are. Your return on investment, your capital assets, your whatever those are. And as a lender, you should be judging a business on its health, right? And that's based on numbers. So to add a layer of what that business is doing, we are seeing more of that for sure. And I would say, I think we are seeing more of this trend to practices and different things are actually getting into the mix of maybe not approving or not alone, but potentially impacting the rate that you might get, or potentially exactly that, some of the incentives.
That makes me mad because farmers will, when there's a new farm practice that comes out or a new technology that we're looking at adopting, they're going to figure out the return on that investment. So it may take more time for one farm operation than another farm operation, but let the expert that is the farmer determine when that makes the most sense for them, rather than another pressure coming from the financial institution that, I'm sorry, does not have the agricultural expertise any more than government does than the farmers do. They're always, underplaying the expertise that farmers have as it comes to these sustainable practices.
And sustainability seems to be the word of the week too, Kelvin. We also saw sustainable aviation fuel get a funding boost this week, which we could see processing happening in Manitoba. Was there any buzz of that at Ag Days this week?
I didn't hear any, but there was an announcement, Canada Infrastructure Bank money going towards the Azure processing facility that's proposed at Portage La Prairie. using canola to produce sustainable aviation fuel. They also have projects in the U.S. and I believe one in BC as well that they're working on as expectations there too of demand for this renewable fuel for airlines down the road. Which, from a farming perspective, sure, it's good to have that demand, but again, going back to our earlier conversation about inflation and all of these initiatives tend to add costs, and so that needs to be part of the conversation here in terms of the trade-offs here. We can move ahead with implementing these climate policies, whether it's renewable fuels, whether it's carbon tax, but there needs to be part of the conversation the impact that they have on bottom line cost of living and just inflation in general. I think part of what's driving this sticky inflation is government policies that we haven't had a fair conversation about the impact that they actually have on costs to consumers.
You're understating it, not part of what's attributing to it. It's bigger than that. They are the reason we're here today.
So now, Cherilyn, Saskatchewan is a huge producer of canola. This is, already a feedstock for some biofuels. Sustainable aviation fuel would be another one of those. How do you balance, markets for a crop that you grow with an increasing consideration of inflation and these sorts of things? Are you pro biofuel, sustainable fuel, or how do you sort of add those two up?
Yeah, back when we first started talking about biofuels, like so many decades ago, there was this debate around food production versus, fuel production. But I've always been in the camp that we should be using what we grow for so many different things. Cotton shirts. I suppose the argument could be made that land that grows cotton could be used for land that grows food production. It's kind of silly to me to think that every piece of land has to be dedicated to food production. I drink coffee, okay, and it might be a beverage, but it's not food production, so I'm not willing to give up that. So I don't think that argument works for me. I think everything that we grow needs new and better markets all the time. Got all kinds of canola announcements that have happened in this province over the last couple of years, and I'm excited by all of them, even if only some of them come to fruition.
Mm-hmm. It is a good. I think the food versus fuel debate, I don't think it's going to disappear by any stretch, but I would hope that it is a more intelligent conversation than it used to be. But hope isn't necessarily a plan, so we'll see where that goes. Okay, we'll take a quick break, and we'll be back to hear all about Cherilyn's trip to Japan right after this.
CDC Endure is a new oat line from Alliance Seed. High yielding with excellent disease resistance and the quality end users ask for, all in one great oat variety. CDC Endure provides the high beta-glucan levels to make heart-healthy products like breakfast cereals. For more information on CDC Endure oats, as well as any other products from Alliance Seed, check out allianceseed.com or visit any Alliance Seed authorized retailers.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground, we are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Friday for the Issues Panel. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and joining me now, Kelvin Heppner, Cherilyn Jolly-Nagel. Cherilyn, unlike going to Brandon, which is a huge event, you had a tiny little trip to Japan before the holidays. What was that all about?
This was an incredible trip, an incredible opportunity. I was going to speak at a conference put on by the Japanese Biotech Crop Network. And this organization is led by a fellow Global Farmer Network member, Suichi Takamoto, who he and I have become friends since meeting up in Argentina last year. And this guy is just so full of energy and excitement and just gets his shit done. Okay, he put on this conference in less than a year. So the point of me coming to be there was to talk as a farmer about biotechnology, the use of that on our farm, and also, no-till practices. It's impossible to talk about GMO canola and not talk about no-till. So that was the basis of the presentation. But here's the background. Japanese farmers do not have accessibility to GM crops. They are not allowed to grow them, which is mind-blowing to me because Japan is a major importer of Canadian canola, which is genetically modified. So a bit selfishly, my fear is that either consumers or Japanese farmers are going to start to make a stink about that at some point, just like what happened in Italy when the farmers were like, why do Canadian farmers using glyphosate get to come in and we don't get to use it? These are trade issues. So I wanted to go and build that relationship, and also be supportive of the farmers who are trying to access this technology and show them what the benefits are. But here's the catch. Here's what I decided to do different. I brought my family with me. So I have 2 teenage daughters that have been so active on the farm operation. They run every piece of equipment. They're crop checking. They're doing all of these things. They have never lived a day on this farm that didn't grow genetically modified crops. This is almost an archaic science that we're still trying to advocate in other countries. So I wanted them to introduce biotechnology to the crowd, but also to showcase that if they're going to come back to a farm operation, they're going to need something a little jazzier than GM canola, right? They're already looking for what else is coming my way. And that was so effective for them to see these 2 young girls, these massive pieces of equipment, the high clearance sprayers and the combines, and for the Japanese farmers and the participants in the conference to see these girls in these kinds of roles on a farm operation and advocating for science and technology. It was just like proud parent moment, but so effective. They're the future of farming, not me anymore. So if they need new technology and science, you got to give it to them. It was fantastic.
Now I have to ask, did you volunteer them to do this or did they want to? Because
almost like me a little bit, Lyndsey.
A little bit. Mm-hmm.
But here's what I did. I told them about the concept. I said, I'd really love for you to participate. Also, you're not allowed to say no, but I'm going to give you 1 PowerPoint slide. You pick the pictures because teenage girls don't want me picking the pictures.
That's
you
correct.
Pick the pictures of you in the field and operating. And I want 10 to 12 sentences. You don't need to share them with me ahead of time. You're not allowed to bring your phone on stage. So either memorize them or write them down on a piece of paper. And that was it. It was a little trusting on my part and on theirs, I suppose. But it was flawless. They had some great questions, great conversations. They knocked it out of the park. Maybe it's a road show. It's a teachers go on strike in Saskatchewan a long period. I'm thinking this is my backup plan.
Yeah.
I'm going to take this show on the road.
I think that's a great plan, which of course teacher strikes, I feel like we sort of have to prepare for them all the time now, regardless of what province you're in. So I think that's a great idea. So it is fascinating. And before we leave the topic of Japan, everyone listen to me right now, wherever you are. Cherilyn, we need to do better in Canada by one other standard that you mentioned.
In terms of technology, yes. Canada, listen to me, people. Canada needs to up our game related to toilets. Okay?
Yes.
The toilet situation in Japan is second to none. It doesn't matter if you're in the subway, in a high-class fancy restaurant, in a hotel, or in a park. Those toilet seats are heated. They're heated. And they have this beautiful, there's the bidet, so you get the wash, you get the washer and the dryer. So fun. I dare you not to try it. But also there's this little nature button that you can hit that is music. You just listen to the music. It's privacy, I think, when I Google translated it. It's called privacy. So you hit that and you just have these beautiful nature sounds while you're doing your business.
I love it.
Canada needs to up their game.
At the very least, we need the heated seats. I mean, we have them in all our vehicles standard now. Come on. It's so minus 40 at times. Like, come on. Okay. So that's on our to-do list is Canada needs.
They have those in Brandon, Kelvin?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe somewhere. I didn't find them. No.
No. And you didn't need Google Translate on your phone to figure out what the buttons did. No. It's like the 3 seashells. Anyway. Okay. We only have a couple minutes left, and we mentioned this on the show last week with Tyler McCann, but Kelvin, you did write up an article on the Sustainable Ag strategy, that the What We Heard document, and that what we heard was that they didn't want us to apparently find it because it was released very quietly. So that is up on RealAgriculture.com. What has the feedback been this week? Did you get any while you were out and about in Brandon this week as well?
Yeah, I've actually received quite a bit of feedback on social media as well as in person in Brandon. Had quite a few people come up and say, hey, that sustainable ag strategy piece, here are my thoughts on it, kind of thing. And so I think in general, people are that we're quite concerned about restrictions and new red tape and government telling farmers how to farm through this strategy. There was a lot of concern about that. And I think the possibility or the prospects of it fading away and maybe even being mothballed at this point, which is kind of the premise of what the column talked about, it being a signal how quietly they published this report on the Friday before the New Year's long weekend. I don't know for sure that the government's going to go down that path, but potentially there are still some activist-minded people in the bureaucracy at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, and of course in Environment and Climate Change Canada. But I don't think Minister McCauley is the one who's going to be driving that. And so I think in general, the feedback I received was that people are kind of breathing a sigh of relief that maybe the sustainable ag strategy won't be as burdensome as it potentially could have been.
Cherilyn, have you been following this story? Did you participate at all?
It was absolutely good news that it came out quietly the way they did. Look, no government is ever going to come out and say, hey, we're sort of wrong about anything. So this document is a win for us. They took a huge big step back in some of their really absurd, government forward recommendations and talk. I was really nervous when this first came out. So I think the document is a huge win for us. It's also a bit ridiculous. When you read through the priorities of the sustainable ag strategy, they're all the same priorities that farmers have always had. Mitigation to climate. Yep, we've always done that. Resilience to climate, biodiversity, water quality, soil health. There's nothing shocking or new about these priorities. Farmers have always had these priorities. You show me one successful intergenerational farm family that didn't always have those things on their list of priorities. It's silly to me, but the government, really thought they needed to come in and help farmers do better. But we showed them that we're doing pretty darn good without,
And I think we can add this to a heap of files already where the current government has introduced a policy direction, then consulted, and then bailed or backed off. Because they did it in the wrong order. The consultations maybe should have happened before the policy direction was chosen by government and announced. Seed value creation, small business tax changes. I don't know. Those are some of the examples that come to mind in terms of where this has happened too.
And this one for sure too, right? And I guess, I will say maybe the only silver lining in that, or the direction that they've done, or the order they've done this, is that it did light a fire under some butts for sure. But it also has created a lot of friction and a lot of, that condescension and that we know better and that all that and that misunderstanding has not helped the relationship. So, there's two sides of it. I think people were very motivated to speak up, and there was decent, what we heard, contributions, etc. So, that's a positive, I guess, because let's face it, not everybody loves to fill out surveys or, go to government consultations, etc. So it's a tall ask at times to get that feedback, but realistically, I think it also has just damaged this relationship between, the farming public or the farming industry and government for sure. I will say I did find interesting, I think one of the things that stands out to me, because I did read it, and I know that maybe a lot of people won't or wouldn't even have heard of it if we didn't cover it. But one of the things I think that was positive in there is in that sort of what we heard was, I feel like they got the message that any of these programs or discussions or funding has to be through an economic lens. Even if you still move forward with what you're doing, you've got to recognize either the cost or the trade-off or the, and maybe to the good, or, is this a practice that we really need to have happen, but it's very expensive? You've got to address that gap. You have to look at things through an economic lens. So that, I think, was one of the things, and it's pretty high up there as far as what's listed. So I guess there's a difference between hearing and listening. So we'll see what happens, or if this just sort of gets parked. That is all the time we have for today's show. I think we could probably do, as Cherilyn said, another few hours, but we can't, because we'll get and I'll never be allowed to host again. Exactly. All right. Yeah. So Cherilyn, have a wonderful weekend. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys. Great to see you.
All right, Kelvin, stay warm.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good weekend.
All right. If you've got any feedback, give us a call, 1-855-776-6147, or find us across social media at RealAgriculture. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for downloading this episode of the RealAg Radio podcast, brought to you by AIM EC Herbicide from FMC. Whether applied with glyphosate or another labeled tank mix partner, fast-acting AIM EC Herbicide is the go-to tank mix product for the hottest burn-off of the toughest weeds. Start out clean this spring with AIM EC Herbicide.